Hello, and welcome to episode 234 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly podcast of many topics. We are here today to talk about Castlevania, but not the games, the animated series. And I am joined today by three other panelists, starting with Patrick Gann.
Hello, everyone.
And then Alana Hagues.
Hi.
And Michael Sollosi.
Hello.
So we just finished, I just finished, watching Season 3 of Castlevania, the animated series. Spoiler alert, it's good. So it started on television a couple of years ago, and I actually think it originally was planned to be an animated movie. And then they realized that they had maybe more content than that. And then so they turned the first season into 4 episodes and the second season into 8, and then the most recent one was 10. So they keep expanding with every season. And it's loosely based, at least the first season first 2 seasons are loosely based on Castlevania III. And that season 2 and then the most recent season are also loosely based and have some inspirations from Curse of Darkness, which was a PS2 game. I'm not sure when that was released. I'm sure one of you does.
2004, 5, I want to say.
Yeah,
it was definitely the early mid-2000s.
Yeah, mid-2000s, a little bit late in the PS2 life cycle. I don't know the exact year. I played through a significant part of it, but never finished it.
And that's an IGA one as well, right?
Yeah, it had both Lament of Innocence and Curse of Darkness had Koji Igarashi listed as an exec producer. I don't know how involved in development he was, because we never know, but it is an IGA game for sure.
Okay. And one of the things that I personally find most interesting about it is while it takes inspirations from source material, certainly. 2 things is, first of all, the guy who runs the show, a guy named Warren Ellis, has actually never played a Castlevania game, ever. Apparently everything he knows about it is from reading wikis, and he's got a couple people on staff who are like hardcore Castlevania fans. And when someone asked him about it in an interview, he basically said like, oh, I don't have any way to play it. And for the record, he does. Which I think is funny. But the other thing is, like, it's a very, I think partially as a result of that, it's a very loose adaptation. So I personally, at least my own history with the Castlevania series is I've played Symphony of the Night, and that's basically it. But I don't really feel like it has impacted my enjoyment of this series too much. So I guess I'll ask you guys, what are your histories sort of with the Castlevania series, and what inspirations do you guys see here?
When I was a wee lad, my parents would not let me play Castlevania because it was demonic, and I was a good little church boy. And I'm still a good little church boy, but I really like Castlevania 2. Not actually Castlevania 2, but Castlevania also.
Simon's Quest, that's not popular.
Yeah, of all the early ones to zero in on, Simon's Quest would not be my choice.
Yeah. No, I played the games, since their inception, and what I would say generally about what made the Netflix Castlevania series appeal to me is that not only since Iga left, but even before that, not too terribly far after Aria of Sorrow and Dawn of Sorrow, I just was totally losing interest in a lot of sort of boilerplate, repeated story kind of stuff. And the various reboots they attempted, like Lord of Shadows, like totally not doing it for me. Bringing back really important classic characters from what is arguably, the most interesting from the early games, which is Castlevania III, and using Trevor and Sypha and Alucard as sort of a baseline, and then using the story of Alucard's parents to sort of frame everything around, make that the start of the story. That was so much more interesting than any of the games had done. In fact, I would argue the best part of Symphony of the Night is the part where Alucard goes and you see that vision of his mom being crucified. And I think he has to fight a succubus after that. But gosh, like, that was so intense when I was a teenager, seeing that scene and getting this sense for like his human mother and like the conflict there. But digging into the sorrow that existed for Dracula was never really explored in the games. And so I feel like that first season where they established that, I was hooked immediately.
I don't want to say a late comer to Castlevania, but I definitely didn't play any of them until like the mid 2000s. Maybe in a part because of my age, but also because most of the classics had already been and gone by the time I was of an age of playing games like that. So, I mean, I did actually start with Super Castlevania IV on the Virtual Console, and then picked up a couple of the DS games afterwards. So I played some of the later... I played the schlocky anime era, as everybody loves to talk about, the terrible artwork that they used when they've tried to reinvent the series a little bit. But I love those games anyway, even if they have the worst art style. You cannot replace that art at all. Why would you do it with something that's terrible? But anyway, I'm now a dedicated Castlevania fan. I've played probably a couple of the Game Boy games. Curse of Darkness, funnily enough, is one of the ones I haven't played. I think it's the only 3D one I haven't played. I haven't beaten any of the 3D ones, though, I must say. But when the series was announced, I was really skeptical. I thought, there's no way you can make a TV show out of this. Like, there's a story, like, to each game, and obviously there's the Belmont lineage, but what can you do with it? And
right.
Like Pat honed in on, like, the series immediately picks up on Dracula's kind of sorrow and the suffering he goes through with his wife's death and his hatred of humans, and it does a really good job of humanizing and bringing all these characters to life. And I think that the show is pretty exemplar at creating extremely deep characters and extremely fun characters as well. Like, Castlevania has the kind of iconic Belmonts or the Morrises or Soma Cruz, or Dracula is iconic just for being Dracula, and you've got Death and Shaft. You've got all these characters and they're like one template, one note. But the show manages to evolve all of these like figureheads and all of these important names into something that's more three-dimensional and far more interesting, more so than I could ever imagined. It's like, if I made, I don't know, it's like, this is kind of how I imagine Castlevania is playing out, because there's not really many cutscenes, not much story in any of the 2D ones. And this is a really, really good way of like evolving it. And I think that Ellis not actually having played any of the games is beneficial, because me having played most of them and going, oh, you can't make a TV show out of this. And then you've got someone coming in from the outside and going, no, hang on a minute, we can do this. And he has done a really good job of it, I think. So, and I agree, season 3 is really, really good. And I'm excited to gush about it again.
And what about you, Mike?
Right. So I started playing the Castlevania games from an early age when I was renting NES games based on how cool their covers were most of the time. And I played, I think just Castlevania 1 and 2 when I was very young in the age, I don't know, 8 to 10 range. And then several Castlevania games after that. I definitely played Super Castlevania IV during my SNES heyday, and I didn't play Bloodlines until I was emulating Genesis games in the early 2000s. But I played many of them over the years, got really, really into Castlevania Symphony of the Night when I first played it around probably around 2000 or so, and then played all of the 2D Igavania RPG-style ones basically as they came out, and a couple of the 3D ones, but the only one I finished was Lament of Innocence for the PS2. So I'm a big fan of the games. I like the gothic action, how they sort of try to keep to a kind of style, but have the gameplay be sometimes wildly different between games that are even just a year or two apart from each other. And I sort of prefer the older illustrated art style, but when they went from sort of gothic to anime, from Aria of Sorrow to Dawn of Sorrow, I did not enjoy the change, but I still enjoyed a lot of the new games. Like I still think that Order of Ecclesia is the best Castlevania game of the 2000s.
Yeah, that uses the old art style as well, though.
Yeah, they sort of go in between. They go a little bit back to the old art style, but Portrait of Ruin and Dawn of Sorrow definitely were anime as hell in that way. But so I'm a longtime Castlevania fan, and when I heard that there was an animated series coming out of it, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And if they're gonna have Castlevania 3, that makes sense. I didn't play 3 until many years after its like NES time. And I thought that was a pretty logical choice, because there's multiple characters, but otherwise it's a sort of a classic Castlevania story. And I was really impressed with that first season, With each new season, they seem to be expanding the world and characters, all the while using Castlevania touchstones and concepts, like Belmont family, Dracula is this ancient, famous, powerful vampire, and they basically tell their own story and create their own setting that they want to create while hitting Castlevania flags and Castlevania moments, but without recreating anything wholesale or being too married to canon or lore.
Yeah.
And so that, gives a really creative person like Warren Ellis freedom to tell the story he wants, and it turns out he's an awesome storyteller, and it's a really, really cool production in general. And I thought that each season was probably better than the last.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I agree with that. I mean, I think it's interesting for me because reading about it, just in preparation for this, I was like, oh, this was a reference to that, and that was a reference to this other thing. And I think that if I was like a huge fan of the series, I would appreciate that they were doing that. And I'm not, but if I was, I would appreciate that they're doing that. But I appreciate it as someone coming to it with. I mean, I played some of the NES Castlevania games, but I don't remember because I probably didn't get past the first level.
The oldest Castlevania game I've beaten is Super 4.
Yeah.
I just remember them being hard. NES hard, but hard. And so I think that it pays homage to people coming to it in a way that makes sense because it's gone in such a different direction that it's not going to bother people. I actually think that the changes that Ellis makes would be more problematic to fans if he was trying to follow the story a little bit more closely. The way he blends and mixes and matches, I think just shows an appreciation for it, but hey, it's almost like I'm telling an alternate universe version of this story. So that works for me.
I think it's worth noting that the way, especially outside of the human realm and the something AD timeline, the way that monsters and beasts and demons are used because they can be summoned and resummoned. They've done a really good job with that, I know. And shout outs to you, Alana, for what you wrote for RPG Fan in your season 3 review. You noted probably one of my favorite scenes of all in season 3 was when Isaac goes up against that crazy archmage and Legion, who was called Grand Falloon in the old localization of Symphony of the Night. It's just like this spherical pile of bodies and stuff. The way
with bodies wearing crowns of thorns, like Jesus at the crucifixion. Yeah,
it is so intense, and they did that so well. And conceptually, it's a completely different thing than what you would have seen in Symphony of the Night. But the concept of, you can't even call it one creature. It's like I don't know what you would call it because it's Legion, But that kind of thing just works really well. Also, I can't remember the name of the monster, but the monster who does the brainwashing in the main town in season 3, where Trevor and Sypha are, also a reference to another monster. Alana, do you remember who that was?
Is that monster given a name? I don't remember.
I don't remember.
I think they called it the Visitor in the context of the show, but I'm not sure if it's based on a specific Castlevania monster or if it has a name other than the Visitor.
No, I don't remember anything specific about that, but I do certainly remember some designs mimicking. I definitely remember seeing a couple of Sloggerers. Those always stick in my mind.
Slogger and Gaibon show up in season 2. I'm chasing after the Trevor Alucard's Sypha part of the story.
Yep. But yeah, I feel like the Visitor was modeled or patterned after another of the sort of larger demons from the Symphony of the Night era, late 90s, maybe Rondo of Blood as well. But there's just so much that they do with the supernatural creatures, the demonic creatures. I mean, even the character Carmilla was originally just the name of one of the generic female vampires. And it's well, what if we use this character design and give her a real freaking story and not just make her, just a random enemy to fight? What if she's another major vampire lord of her own area? And sure enough, she's a really memorable and formidable villain. So I think that
I thought she was a boss in Rondo of Blood.
She's
a boss in a couple of games.
She's a boss in some games, and then she can also just be a generic vampire that you fight in different games.
And she's also one of the first vampires in fiction. The book Carmilla was occurred before Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, yeah. Historically, the name was the right choice because she is like the first known female vampire in like vampiric lore outside of Castlevania.
Huh. I didn't know that. That's cool.
You should read it. It's good. Carmilla is, for the time, it is good.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in, when was that written, in the 1870s or something?
No, I think it was, I want to say mid or early. Yeah, I don't remember.
All right.
Specifically.
I mean, because when does Bram Stoker's Dracula come out? Like
1890 something.
Yeah, 1890 something. It had several theatrical adaptations by Hamilton Dean, and including some starring Bela Lugosi before the famous 1930s film version with Bela Lugosi in it. A great Hungarian American, that Bela Lugosi.
I'm learning a lot about vampire lore today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
But Castlevania had always been sort of like tied a little bit to vampire fiction and vampire lore, but really was just a sort of man with a whip fights monsters in a gothic horror setting. And they sort of created their own lore around Dracula that's definitely not in some of the books, like the castle rising every 100 years. But then they do adapt some things directly from vampire fiction, like Alucard turning into a wolf, mist, and a bat, which are the three things that Dracula turns into in the book. This is not a straight adaptation of any one Castlevania game, which you've alluded to a lot. It comes closest to Castlevania III and Curse of Darkness, but they really sneak bits of every Castlevania game in here. They mention Leon Belmont from Lament of Innocence at one point, and which is the earliest game in the Castlevania canon, and they mention him being the Belmont that traveled from France to Eastern Europe, which explains why his name is so damn French, but and why the name Belmont looks much more French than it does Slavic or Germanic. But they are very clever with using Castlevania imagery and names without while still telling their own story. Like, what goes on in Lindenfeld doesn't really resemble any Castlevania story, but it's awesome as one of the plot lines of season 3. And Patrick mentioned how Lindenfeld was the main town of season 3. I sort of disagree with that. This is a story that is building towards something bigger, but really has 4 scenes or 4 journeys, all going in parallel directions. And the main thrust of Isaac's story is that he wants revenge against Hector for Hector's betrayal of Dracula, but Isaac and Hector don't have a single line of dialogue together in season 3. That's right. That's going to be season 4 or season 5 territory. So they do a really cool job of having these 4 stories going on in 4 different parts of the world, where Isaac travels across probably a third of a continent, and Alucard does not leave the Belmont and Dracula castle grounds. But I am really, really intrigued for the journeys each of these characters are taking. I guess you would call them the 5 main characters, if it's Alucard, Hector, Isaac, Sypha, Trevor, and what they're building towards. I'm watching the end of season 3, which I finished a few nights ago. Only made me more excited for a potential season 4 and what random characters they might draw from Castlevania lore from season 4. Because as a longtime Castlevania fan, I'm excited whenever I recognize something. Like I think they use near the end of the fight in the final episode, Trevor does a giant burning whip attack after he fights part of an enemy with 2 whips, which is also dope. But that burning whip is the weapon upgrade that you get briefly in Castlevania 3 in a few specific spots.
Yeah, I had a stupid moment there where I was like, "Oh my god, they're using the move," kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like they're doing the burning whip.
Yeah,
like really.
Like when he got the second whip that he gets, what's the chain whip called that he uses?
They call it the Morning Star.
Morning Star.
Yeah,
that's right. I was like, "Oh my god, you can get that in the games as well." It was like,
the Morning Star upgrade is an upgrade of your leather whip in a couple of them.
I will say, without getting the reference, that was such a cool scene.
Yeah, it was very, very cool.
And they make all the whip fighting so cool. I think that these fight scenes must be a little challenging to animate because they don't have them. They don't have them all the time, but when they do, they're just awesome. Yeah. Like the fights in, season 3, episode 9 was the sex and death episode. because every single scene was either a sex scene or a monster massacre scene. But the fighting was just breathtaking. Like all of Sifa's cool fire and ice magic, and Alucard being as stylish as possible with the sword familiar, and Trevor fighting with between 1 and 2 whips, or I should say between 0 and 2 whips. I think I would have liked this series a lot if it was fighting every episode, but because they make because the building is so good, and the fights are so cathartic, it's a really powerful effect. I've been talking too long, but
that's good.
Yeah, the bottom line is fighting good. Not sure if more fighting better or.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Pat.
It's really hard to say. So first of all, there are 4 parallel stories here. I referred to Lindenfeld as the main town because I actually went back and clocked it, and of the 4 parallel plots, the Trevor and Sypha one does get more time than any of the others.
You clocked it? You actually found it?
Yeah, I actually did.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
You say you clocked it, and we still haven't had a clock tower in these episodes yet.
Give it time.
Save it's season 4, baby.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I have no objective.
Like gears.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to say, I think it wouldn't. I'm not sure it would have worked to have too much action. I at first I was like, okay, this is a really slow build because they did visit each of the 4 subplots in every episode, which means you only got a little bit of ground gained in dialogue or in solving mysteries, and it takes a long time, but you get this enormous payoff in the last 2 episodes.
And in season 2, the last 2 episodes had some really awesome action in it.
No, I was going to say, it's not even the last 2, is it? Like, the last episode kind of is just nothing, really. It's just like a resolution episode, where everybody decides where they're going to go.
Right?
But
the second to last one, Mm-hmm.
6 and 7. But no.
But also we get maybe the most distinctive Castlevania music moment in the whole series when Bloody Tears drops. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's amazing. I mean, I think that, I guess I should back up for a second. First of all, if you haven't watched the Castlevania animated series and you're still listening at this point, stop and go back and watch it and then keep listening. But yeah, I mean, I think that for me, like in the first 2 seasons, and I know we're going to focus mostly on the 3rd season, in the first season and even in the 2nd season for me, like I thought that things moved a little too quickly. Like in season 2, which I enjoyed, I thought was really good. Episode 7, the music cues were incredible. But like I wanted, the things I liked most about season 2 were the interplay between the 3 main characters, between Alucard, Sypha, and Trevor. Mm-hmm. I thought that's really what brought the series to life and their interactions. And I wanted more development of Trevor and Alucard in particular. And I wanted to see more of that. Whereas with season 3, they slow it down to such a crawl. But to me, every single scene is still fascinating. I mean, I thought season 3 was far and away like a huge leap up from a writing perspective over season 2. And season 2, I think, honestly, like the action scenes with Dracula, I think are cooler than anything in season 3. But it doesn't matter to me because I am so much more invested in the characters. And we haven't really talked about the fact that at the end of season 2, they kill off the villain and allowing them to like sort of wipe the tables clean, and you think that Carmilla is going to be like the centerpiece of season 3, but she's not.
The thing is, part about season 3 is that Carmilla and her vampire sisters want to use Hector to raise an army of night creatures, and but nobody in that castle knows that Isaac is headed towards them, bent on revenge, and he already has an army of night creatures. So I think we're going to have a vampire versus Forge Master, night creature versus night creature war as part of season 4, presuming that we get I think they did get renewed. Yeah, okay, so we are getting season 4.
Yeah.
So and I don't know if Trevor, Sypha, or Alucard will be involved in that. So they're building towards moments and clashes that I am too uncertain to try and predict. It's super cool, everything that they're setting up.
Mm-hmm. I'll make what I think is a pretty safe prediction about season 4 based on the way season 3 ends. Is that you're definitely right about the Isaac Hector Forge Master clash that's coming. I suspect Sypha and Trevor will be pulled into it, and they will try to enlist Alucard's help, and Alucard will be more than a little reticent after everything he's been through, and they might even need to move the castle, and he might be like, yeah, last time someone asked me to move the castle, they died, so let's not go there. And I think that's that's how they're going to reconnect, is in trying to put a stop to some insane bloodshed that's going to go down around Styria. That's my guess.
I mean, I think it's a reasonable guess. I guess sort of backing up back into a second in terms of talking about the unexpected and things like that. To me, I think that the thing that even makes season 3 more interesting beyond sort of the predictions that we have for it is how well they develop even the brand new characters. I actually think like Lenore is the most interesting character here.
Lenore is the best character. Lenore is the best character.
And she's super fascinating. And I think Lenore. That, again, I think that's a tribute to how effectively because you could argue this season is table setting. I mean, you're talking about what's going to happen in season 4, but for me, I think the table setting here is probably just as fascinating as it would have, as like sort of moving that action forward. Whereas in something like season 2, they would have moved it forward, I think, a little bit quicker, at least to me.
Yeah. And for the record, if anyone wants my opinion, every single dialogue between Lenore and Hector is my favorite scene in season 3. Like,
I actually agree
you could just cut to those, and I'm just like, this was some of the best anything that's come out of Netflix in forever.
I was watching this at the same time I was watching season 3 of the excellent cartoon Ladybug and Cat Noir, which is basically French Sailor Moon.
For bugs.
Yeah, but with bug motifs. So like I was balancing this this rated R gothic violent action show with a show about a girl that transforms into a ladybug superhero, and this is a roundabout way of saying that Netflix has some pretty interesting animated content going around in 2020. And for all audiences too, because I mean I think that the Magic School Bus reboot probably isn't for adults, but Castlevania definitely is.
I'm going to watch the Magic School Bus reboot now that you've said that.
It's
awesome.
It's all right, and they even brought back what's her name? Lily Tomlin, the original voice of Miss Frizzle, back for just one episode because it's Miss Frizzle's niece or something is the new Miss Frizzle, but it's it was all right, but I would recommend Castlevania before the Magic School Bus reboot.
Fair enough.
So what did everybody else think about the Lenore storyline? I know me and Pat have weighed in here.
I love the Lenore storyline. I feel bad for what's happening to Hector, but between this and the rumination on vampire politics in season 2 made me really intrigued by how vampire society is going to flourish post Dracula, because Dracula seemed to be the oldest, strongest, most powerful vampire in society, and he brought vampires from multiple continents to Wallachia or Romania or Hungary or wherever this takes place. So with a power void appearing in Dracula's absence, we get these vampire sisters in Styria with Carmilla, Lenore, Striga, and Marana. And the way that Lenore manipulates Hector, like putty in her hands, leading to a sex scene in episode 9, and Hector entering slavery in season 10, it was breathtaking. Like Lenore, like the way that she was luring Hector into her trap was really riveting for all of season 3. I don't know if it was my favorite side story, because I just really like Trevor and Sypha together.
Yeah.
Yes, they're a good couple.
Yeah, they're a great couple, and them interacting with Saint Germain, possibly the weirdest Castlevania reference in this entire thing. He was a goofball in a top hat who was possibly a time traveling magician in Curse of Darkness, and he loses a battle with Death, and then gives Hector an item. Hector's the main character of Curse of Darkness, and then disappears. And when they they introduced Saint Germain, and I realized what character he was, I'm like, really? They're bringing back this dude?
They're bringing back this dude, and also it's Bill Nye. That's
right?
The great thing about it.
My second favorite voice casting in this whole show, because the captain, who is a character that Isaac meets in his story, is voiced by Lance Reddick from The Wire and the John Wick movies.
I did not notice that.
Yeah, no,
oh my gosh.
He's Lieutenant Daniels and the concierge of the hotel in those
I love
two
Lance
things.
Reddick.
So I
love him even more now that I didn't recognize.
Yeah, so Lance Reddick doing an Islander accent was my favorite voice casting.
Yeah, the voice acting and the cast were all very good.
Ridiculously good.
Yeah, Jason Isaacs as
The judge.
The judge.
Yeah.
But we could talk about the judge subplot for quite some time. I mean, the big reveal at the end of season 3 about his little pleasures. Holy crap, that was some dark stuff right there.
Yeah, it was very dark, but from like sort of a thematic perspective, I wasn't really sure what point Ellis was trying to make. Like, it was shocking, it was dark, it was messed up, but like, why did I need to know like this dude's evil now too? Is like the point just like that everyone's evil? Like, it seemed, I don't know. That was like maybe the one moment where I was like, that just seems like excessive to me personally. But I'm just curious if anybody else can justify that to me.
Oh, I didn't feel that way at all. I think it had to do with, I mean, right when you meet the judge from the start, it takes a while till you know whether or not he's on the side of good, and he's certainly on the side of sanity, and he's right, he's order and not chaos, but he's certainly not lawful good on the old 3x3 alignment chart. And I think it's an important theme to tie into how Isaac feels about humanity. Isaac's not there for that part, but it's certainly driving home for the viewer that sort of nihilistic, kill them all and let God sort them out, or the devil or somebody. That view that Isaac has taken, and as he's going, people are trying to suggest to him, hey, maybe there's still some good in the world, and he's conflicted. But the story ends for us with Sypha and Trevor with this little side plot saying, hey, the guy that helped you out, even though he's one of the quote unquote good guys, he's a pretty messed up human. And are humans still worth keeping around if these are the people we rely on to run the little towns and villages of Europe? It's a tough question. Yeah,
I think this show really wants to make it very clear that there is no one who is straight up neutral good in this universe. I mean, the closest might be Sypha, but you have this judge who is, I would call, lawful neutral. He really only cares about maintaining order and doing what's good for Lindenfeld, even though it's a lot of it is ruling a little harshly and sometimes murdering people that annoy him, which includes troublemaking children, which leads to that chilling moment where you see the corpses of people he's set aside and killed at his home.
Yeah, but his shoe trophies.
Yeah, that was that was a little gross. But then you have a character who I thought was going to be bad, but I ended up sympathizing with a little too much probably. And that's in season 2. There's a vampire named Godbrand who's he's awesome. He's a boorish Viking who definitely enjoys drinking and womanizing and violence and a bunch of horrible things. But in the discussions of vampire politics that we got a lot of in season 2, a startling amount of in season 2, he's the one saying, "Hey, this complete nihilism of Dracula wanting to destroy everything is not good for vampires. We need humans around for feeding. We should keep them around as in controlled populations like livestock." If we want vampires to thrive after this war. And that's falling upon deaf ears because secretly Dracula and Isaac want to annihilate everything. Hector's a little bit more naive, so after talking to Carmilla and others, Hector supports the idea of killing humanity because of all of the evil he's seen in humanity, but keeping humans around for vampires. Like, I was shocked with how much I agreed with what Godbrand was saying for him being an awful, like, mostly evil character. And I also found myself agreeing with the plans of Carmilla and her vampire sisters a little too often, because this show really, really is determined to see the goodness in vampires, especially with Dracula as a Renaissance man. Dracula having all of these secrets of science and medicine and technology that is centuries of accumulated knowledge that he's preserving, versus a lot of evil activity from humans, like what the church does in seasons 1 and 2, how the judge behaves in season 3, how Isaac sees the good and evil in humanity during his journey. He's beset by bandits early on, and then he meets this merchant and has a rather beautiful philosophical conversation with him. And then he meets the sea captain, voiced by Lance Reddick, who is another person that lets Isaac see the good in humans. But
as soon as he gets off that boat, though.
Yeah, no, it almost alternates good human, bad human, good human, bad human with Isaac's experience.
That's the point.
Yeah, and it's because Isaac truly hated all humans before season 3, and now he's a little bit more conflicted, but is definitely leading an army of night creatures into Styria. So again, this show absolutely wants to operate in ethical shades of gray, and is having me root for vampires an uncomfortable amount.
Yeah, definitely. As season 2 even did that though as well. Like not just Godbrand, but like the entire council basically. Like Dracula himself is probably the most sympathetic character in the entire show, and
absolutely
he is the big bad apparently. And not once, he was not pathetic isn't the right word, but he was very he was tired and exhausted, and like the big showdown with him, even though it was a big and flashy and it was a proper fight and things like that, you got the sense that he was giving up. Like just before that fight, he was really like, do I really need to do this? He was doubting why he needed to do it. Like he just didn't have the faith in it. But like even through season 3, like Carmilla and the Vampire Sisters, Isaac, you are rooting for them. Like in different ways, like not all the time, but you see why they stand for what they stand for. And actually, to contrast the judge from Trevor and Cypher's story, I kind of took it in with Alucard's story, which involves two characters, two Japanese vampire hunters called Taka and Sumi, who we'll probably get to a little bit more in a bit. But both of those stories are about the two of them, the two groups, trusting other people and then having the rug pulled out from them at the end. So it's like they find these new spaces with new people to trust, and then it's taken away from them. So the human/heroes, I guess, the hero characters are in a worse position than the villains are, who are both Carmilla and that have got their potential, they've got their new pet and Hector, and then Isaac has got his big demon army, and it's like, well, where's this gonna go kind of thing.
Saint Germain, if he is human, is now in another dimension or another timeline, because the ultimate plot in Lindenfeld was this group of humans obsessed with Dracula and pulled into a hell cult by a demon, by that demon called the Visitor, or I should say that night creature called the Visitor. They avoid the term demon in this series.
Yeah, they do
mostly.
They do.
But they were trying to open a portal to hell to revive Dracula. Saint Germain wanted to use the same power to open a portal to a mysterious loved one who's not exactly identified. And so Saint Germain ends up sort of getting his way, but the entire village of Lindenfeld is completely annihilated as a result, which just leaves Trevor and Sifa with a hollow feeling that, if anything, just reminds me of Dracula in season 2. Dracula's has seen so much loss and felt so much pain. He just sort of wanted to end it all, and that is like I wonder if that hollow feeling that Trevor and Sifa felt leaving Lindenfeld is kind of like Dracula, like they're trying to do the most good, but end up suffering the most, or at least suffering without dying.
Mm-hmm.
In mentioning Dracula again, we haven't mentioned this scene. Part of that, it's either the Eternal Corridor or Infinite Corridor, the whole time and space traveling that Saint Germain's doing, the whole thing they're trying to open in Lindenfeld. That scene that we get when they cut to that portal into hell, and you just see, Dracula holding his wife, and like he looks over when like they're trying to summon him, and it's like you can almost see him saying like no, don't summon me.
Yeah.
Like I'm happier here. Like even if this place is barren, at least I'm just quiet and calm with my wife. Leave me the hell alone. Like it made me think of that line in Milton's Paradise Lost, where it talks about Satan making a heaven out of hell. Not that it was a paradise for Dracula, but it was a peaceful place and a place where he could rest with her. And he's like, don't bring me back to your crap. I don't want it. And he doesn't say it. They just give you you see his eyes. Yeah. And then it's like, and they prevent him from being summoned, but it looks like he didn't want to be summoned anyway.
I'm not 100% sure on that. He definitely sees the portal or something approaching from the portal, and then he holds up his hand, but I'm not sure if it's to try to stop the portal or to maybe drag him and his wife back into the mortal realm. I don't exactly know. And because the Castlevania series is predicated on Dracula being resurrected periodically, even though we've talked over and over how Warren Ellis is not married to Castlevania lore. I think reviving Dracula is the kind of Castlevania lore that they might recreate.
It's going to happen, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think it has to.
I mean, I think it'll happen in order to sort of sow more chaos once, I don't know, maybe the vampires win next season, and then Saint Germain shows up with them or something. I don't know, but that's sort of the way that I could see that going, personally.
Which vampires win, though? Because
that's a good question. Yeah,
Oh.
the four vampires is what I was referring to. But yes, who knows?
Yeah, I think the sisters go down. Part of me hopes that Lenore makes a deal with Dracula to survive because she's the diplomat, and the diplomat is not weak.
I mean, I know we're moving around a lot here, but this reminds me of the first scene she has with Hector, where he tries to mess with her because he thinks she's weak, and then the way that she attacks him, I'm like, okay, here's a character I can get down with. And I gotta be honest, like I identify enough with Hector that I'd be like, yeah, I'd probably fall for this too. I definitely would.
Oh no! If I was in Hector's position, the same thing would have happened to me, except it would have happened much more easily and quickly.
Yeah, I'm kidding, right?
Yeah. No, seriously. Like when you're watching episodes 8 and 9, like leading up to the slavery bond moment. You can, one, you totally see it coming, and two, there was this tiny part of me that was like, maybe she really means it. Maybe she's not tricking him. And you really want to believe it in the moment. And like, that's good writing. Like, that is why I am so impressed by that scene, is like, if you can make me feel the way I know Hector is supposed to be feeling, you've really done your job as a writer. And not just writing, also the voice acting, everyone behind the show. I mean, that everything about it was just, it was incredible.
I did not believe that she was really falling in love with Hector for a second.
No, that is exactly what I was going to say. I did not buy it for a second. She was walking him around in a dog collar. There is no way there was anything. There was no way she wanted him for anything other than she's probably going to I don't know how into the sisterhood she is. They feel like really tight knit, and I guess we'll see where it goes. I don't want to theorize any more on it, but like, she might. You know what I mean? She might go off, like Pat said, go off on the deal with Dracula. Who knows? But let's not maybe think too far ahead and stick to season 3.
Well, Striga and Marana are lovers, and I don't think they're going to betray each other.
No way.
And Carmilla is sort of the one that united them, and is probably the strongest and wildest of them, is what I'm guessing. And Lenore is, if one of them betrays the sisterhood, I think it'll be Lenore, since diplomacy and mind games are her strength. But I don't know. I think that the sisterhood will probably remain strong until maybe one of them dying fractures them. And I also noticed how the four of them are sort of the brilliant schemer, the diplomat, the warrior, and the organizer. I think Dracula was all 4 of those things. And combined, the sisterhood might be a match for Dracula, but ultimately, I think, especially since how they communicate Dracula being so powerful, when he just beats the crap out of the main trio towards the end of season 2, and they show flashbacks of him being a completely savage conqueror. I don't think we've encountered. I think nothing in season 3 is as powerful or threatening as Dracula. So Dracula's resurrection is probably inevitable, and might sort of recreate the the game's canon of Dracula's castle rising every 100 years. I don't know if they will or not, but I think a lot of they're building up for a lot of stuff in season 4, but Dracula's return is inevitable.
I think Lenore loves Hector.
Nope.
No, I think she does.
Explain yourself.
I just also think that she's a narcissist, and that's what love looks like to a narcissist.
Maybe.
I think she has affection for Hector. I would be surprised if it turns into love, like what Dracula had with his wife, which I think was love.
No, it's not like true love, but it's as good as she's gonna get.
I mean, it's like the love that you have for your dog.
Well, she calls him a pet. And
that's right. That's what I'm saying.
But I think it does go slightly beyond that. For her, utility and usefulness and her plans and her needs will come so much further above anything else that she ultimately thus can't know love, like Vlad Tepes did with his wife, or like Belmont and Belnades. But for who she is, I think Hector's the closest she'll get. I don't think they're going to show any sort of stronger love interest for her ever in the show. So,
does she need one?
No. Most of the characters don't have one. But I think the struggle for Hector will be, does he develop some kind of Stockholm syndrome, or like, is the distrust so strong that it leads to hatred, that he wants to kill her? Like, I don't know what it's going to look like, but
I think he already has some form of Stockholm syndrome, which is why he was able to profess loyalty to her so eagerly. And it's not love; it's maybe the love that someone has for a cat that's useful enough to catch mice. It's like Lenore manipulated Hector. It's going to be a lot of suffering for Hector in season 4. But I don't think that Lenore loves Hector. I think that I'm fascinated to see where their characters go. But it's you're being a little bit too much of a romantic here, Pat. Is my feeling.
It was funny because I was reading an interview with Warren Ellis about why Hector has to go through so much suffering. And he said, like, his voice just pisses him off. He's got, like, this heroic voice. So he's like, but he also, like, deals with suffering really well. So I don't think I'm going to change it anytime soon. But I think that's just, like, Hector's lot in life. And I actually think that Hector is probably, from Ellis's perspective, like, the worst kind of human. Like, he has, like, ultimately he has no principle.
Yeah, exactly. He's so gullible. Like, look what happened to him with Carmilla in season 2. And then it's happened again in season 3. And I was just kind of rolling my eyes a little bit. I was like, are you kidding? Are you doing this again kind of thing? And then it just escalates.
I don't know if he has principles or convictions other than curiosity. Like he wanted, like when he was a little kid learning Forge Master techniques, he was reviving dead cats and dogs and just wanting to learn more. And he's basically still a child without real convictions, but definitely wanting to be a Forge Master and wanting to be a part of something. He's handsome and important, but also a bit of a follower.
Yeah, I felt really sorry for him, and I guess this comes from reading wikis, because I know what happens. I haven't played Castlevania Curse of Darkness, but I know what happens, and I know the in-between, I suppose, or the before Curse of Darkness. Yeah. So I see where this may go, basically. And I still feel sorry for him, but yeah, I think that he's an idiot for being so gullible, and he's just going to come out of the other end of it at some point. But
I hope he meets up with some combination of either Alucard and or Trevor and Sifa, so he can, see a better side of heroism and humanity and use his powers for good a little bit. But that's just me wanting the best for the characters I mostly like in this show, which is almost everyone, really. Like, I didn't exactly shed tears for Taka and Sumi, but I felt bad. I felt bad for Alucard after what happened between him and Taka and Sumi. This is a pretty large cast without anyone being obviously good except for maybe Sifa, and everyone having at least some interesting wrinkle to their character. And this is a cast of characters that, enters 15 or into the 15 or 20 range. It's a really impressive achievement.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that with Taka and Sumi in the Alucard storyline, I think that, again, and I like the season a lot, but I think that one of the weaknesses of that particular storyline is you get so little time with those two together without being in front of Alucard, that I don't feel like they have the sort of coloring for me to there's not well drawn enough for me to feel particularly bad for what Alucard does to them. Like, I feel bad because Alucard is lonely and obviously unhappy and obviously wants people there, but like in terms of like them feeling betrayals all the time, and so like they're just going to assume that Alucard is betraying them. Like, I don't know enough about that for me to really have like a strong connection.
I want to hear if you guys think I'm crazy, but along with the fact that I think Taka and Sumi were probably the least well-written characters, or maybe they just didn't get enough time for me to learn enough about them, I think there was a setup in the last few episodes there where, Alucard said he was going to teach them things, but ultimately what he ended up doing was just giving them access to this giant Belmont vault and said, have at it, and let them do their thing. And then it was, to me, it almost goes back to like an Adam and Eve story. Like, they tasted the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then bad shit went down. And it was almost like if you hadn't introduced them to those things, at least without context, because that's what it seems like he did. He was just dropped them off in that vault and was like, have fun, learn things, and then like they get overwhelmed and like drunk on the potential for power with all the things they can do. And then when they push for that quickly, and Alucard's like, I don't want to do anything right now. And it's like that zeal overcomes them. And I felt like there was something very like Adam and Eve like about Taka and Sumi.
I don't exactly agree, but one thing that Zach alluded to was that Taka and Sumi, the viewer does not get a lot of scenes with them alone without Alucard. And I think that it boils down to Alucard being a little too trusting and naive. Taka and Sumi traveled there to learn how to kill the vampire that was ruling that the part of Japan where they lived, and also kill the remains of her army after they learned that, what was her name, Cho? I think
that sounds right.
Yeah. Cho or Sho, and they wanted to learn how to defeat Cho. When they learned that Cho was dead, how to defeat her followers, and Alucard wanted to teach them and pass on all of the knowledge that the Belmonts and his father had accumulated. And I think Alucard's idea was to teach another generation, and their idea was to just go back to Japan with vampire killing knowledge and technology. And because Alucard was too trusting and Taka and Sumi weren't trusting enough, their goal of defeating the Japanese vampires outweighed whatever affection and whatever want of learning they really had. So basically Alucard and Taka and Sumi's goals didn't quite align, and that was hidden from the viewer a little bit because almost all of the scenes with Taka and Sumi are with Alucard. So I don't know if it was an Adam and Eve fruit of the tree of knowledge thing so much as just Alucard trusting too much and having his trust betrayed, and that affecting his character going forward.
Right, and I agree with you, but I guess my point is that I think that the way that it's written, it ends up making it, with the rest of the three storylines, I feel like both sides are given, even the members of the Priory and Trevor and Sypha's storyline, like I know more about them than I know about these two characters. And so because of that, I think that it, for me, like it lowers, I think that we're supposed to feel like that contrasting tragedy between Alucard and then those two. And to me, it just turns them into like ciphers for whatever it was they wanted Alucard to go through this season, personally.
Also, what they do is abhorrent and completely like, almost out of context. Like, not out of context, but like almost out of character. Like, you maybe get a hint that there's something, they know something and they want to do something, but not that. Like, good grief. Like, I was pretty uncomfortable in that scene, and I'm pretty good with things like that and some violence, but that was genuinely like, oh my God, kind of, I'm not sure how to take this. I'm not, because they're essentially taking advantage of Alucard because he's lonely, and they know that, and they're showing him affection, and then all of a sudden they're strapping him down to a bed, doing things to him, and then he kills them, which is They could have done it way sooner too. Like the sequence goes on way longer than it needed to. If they really wanted to strap him down, he was already like there for it before that. Yeah, episode 9 is an unusual beast. It has some really good highs. And that, like, the melding between the violence and the action scenes and the two sex scenes is very. It's meant to make you feel uncomfortable, but like Alucard's in particular, I don't know. It was a lot to take in, and I thought.
And the way they were chaining him to the bed with silver, and you saw the silver burning into his flesh, was very uncomfortable. And even the way that Alucard killed them by summoning his sword familiar was, which is one of the things he hadn't told them about, was sort of was unsettling. Like between that and what we learned about the judge being sort of a serial killer, were character turns at the end of season 3 that I think were designed to unsettle the viewer.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that felt a little icky about the Taka and Sumi not sex scene. Like I could totally accept what was going on with Hector and Lenore, and I did like that for this climactic, thing with episode 9. It was like you were having 2 epic battles, and you were also having these 2 like dark, twisted sex scenes, and it was like
the sex and death episode.
Yeah, for Lenore and Hector, I was like, all right, I get what's going on. That makes sense, and it's a fairly similar thing. And it's always, to me, it's always sad, when sex is used as a weapon, and as a tool for deceit or manipulation. But I feel like it's especially awful for Alucard, who, it's been made abundantly clear at this point. He even says like he's losing his mind from loneliness, before Taka and Sumi come along. But he didn't see them, and we have no hint or reason to believe that he sees them as people that he would pursue sexually. But then they almost use that as a weakness against him, and it made me feel like really yuckers inside. So I'm glad I'm not the only one that felt that way.
I mean, I can deal with some stuff like that, but that was definitely, it was more the shock of it happening, I think, because there were scenes in the show where Alucard was like training Taka and Sumi, and they were having a good time, and they were like hugging and holding hands and things like that and doing things. It was like, it didn't feel anything beyond like, not companionship, but like it was good friendship and kind of trust. And for it to evolve into that was just, I don't know, it didn't sit right with me, and it was and I know Warren Ellis is known for doing things like this, because I believe Warren Ellis has written a number of comics, and I know he's quite well known for graphic violence, and obviously Castlevania is not ungraphic in terms of normal bloody violence. But I don't know, like, I don't think it needed to be that at all. It was too much, I think. No. Like, I'm not sensitive about things like that at all. But yeah.
I mean, I've heard some criticisms leveled against this about like the volume of profanity that the characters use. And first of all, in real life, I use just that much profanity. So I know like excess is the point of this show sometimes, I think. Yeah. And I totally see that. But in this case, it was like excess that didn't jive for me. Like it didn't feel naturally led up to. It didn't feel fully formed, and like the sort of like the familial relationship between the two of them, and then onto Alucard. Like, yeah, I definitely, again, I have a very high tolerance for all of these things, but
I think when you said familial, I think that might be it. Like you said, like when they were sort of like, they're like training, and then they sort of like roll around, and it's like, there's almost this like father and child relationship. So it almost feels incestuous for a moment. Well, actually they're brother and sister. So there's that part too.
It is indeed incestuous. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
I think that, maybe that's what's hitting me, is like, as my creep factor is like hitting its max with that scene. Yeah. And I mean, I am typically squeamish to a lot of this kind of stuff, but for good storytelling, I can forego that. And that's why I loved Castlevania so far. But man, yeah, the Taka and Sumi stuff was just like, whoa.
I don't think they're brother and sister. I think they were raised together as orphans.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
it's not clear.
Yeah, I think they were raised together as orphans, and they have a partnership that might be like siblings. But
it's like Wuthering Heights. Okay.
Yeah, and I thought their partnership at first might have been romantic, but then I sort of just let it stay uncertain for most of the viewing of this. I'm not sure any of the violence or sex crossed the line for me watching Castlevania, because again, I have a pretty reasonable tolerance for this kind of thing. But there was definitely moments of sex and violence that were meant to unsettle. And some of the violence, especially like the families being burned and having their souls sucked away to the priory around the end of season 3, and some of the more brutal decapitations or disembowelments. Like a lot of that is unsettling, and of course the scene with the sex scene with Taka, Sumi, and Alucard is all really unsettling. But I think it's designed that way. I think it's by design, and I don't want to sound like I'm defending any of it. I think they could have they could have cut some of it and still gotten the message they wanted to communicate across. But I don't know. Like I think they just wanted to communicate these ideas of manipulation and brutality with these different scenes, and they they got it across. But I don't know a lot of. I do read some comics, but I don't know a lot of Warren Ellis's work. I'm not sure of how much of it I've read.
To your point, I mean, yeah, they definitely got the job done. I think all I'm saying is with Taka and Sumi, maybe they got it a little too done, and maybe that's just almost certainly that's probably just my upbringing and my bias. I'm sure for other people, like you pointed out, some of the violence that, like, you know, I'm sitting pretty with it because I'm an American who grew up with, you know, violence being super okay, whereas in other regions and other parts and other cultures in this world, there are people who may find it a lot harder to stomach the violence in, why can't I ever remember the name of this town?
Lindenfeld?
In Lindenfeld.
Mm-hmm.
That they'll find that a lot harder to take than any of the sex scenes. So I think that's a fair point, Michael.
All right. So are there any scenes or characters we haven't talked about that you guys really wanted us to chat about at this point?
I thought that Isaac had maybe the most boring story of these characters, just because it felt like that the least happened. But I loved his conversations with the merchant and the captain. Like him meeting these really interesting people who were determined to get under his skin a little bit, because they could tell how much hate was in Isaac's heart, and they sort of deliberately amused him and helped him in ways that got Isaac reconsidering. I liked moments of Isaac's story because of the minor characters involved. Because I was surprised by the amount of vampire politics in season 2, because I thought that was after season 1. I thought it was going to be like a road show with Alucard, Trevor, and Sifa going on adventures on the way to Dracula's castle. And I think we got that show sort of in between season 2 and 3 with Belnades and Belmont. But Isaac on the road seemed like not enough happened, and I sort of wish we got more conversations with him talking to quirky people, because that was my favorite part of his storyline.
There was that one creature that he makes that is able to
that was my favorite Isaac.
Oh yeah, the fly-like thing that was a former Greek philosopher.
Yeah, that part was great, and I hope there's more with that character in season 4. Like, I hope he's like a second in command with Isaac with the army, and like they have interactions together when they're trying to figure out what to do as they go forward, because he was a really interesting character.
Yeah, I mean, I think Isaac's arc is probably my favorite, actually, because of, I think, I don't really know, it just seems to click with me, and it's the one that, I mean, out of all of the characters, I think Isaac's interpretation has definitely been the loosest. Isaac is another character from Curse of Darkness, but he is extremely different in this adaptation.
Yeah, I think he's the final boss. I didn't beat Curse of Darkness.
He's the main villain in Curse of Darkness, so I'm assuming that's where they're probably going to go with it here. But, like, he's insane. Like, he's absolutely nuts, as far as I'm aware, in Curse of Darkness, in the point where he's kind of, like, twisted. This is similar in that he's scheming and cunning, and he's definitely got an agenda, but it's not as it's not zany, like, kind of stereotypical
no Zane
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not Kafka. He's not the laughing nihilist. He's just nihilist.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Isaac, I'm string my words together properly, because I praised it in my review, and the conversations are what made it for me. And I think, like, I love the action, and I loved how that it's like, it's just infrequent, and the conversations make this series. And I think the two things I loved most about season 3 were the vampire sisters, and Isaac's conversations with all these random people. Like, the conversation he had with the man, with this merchant who he got the mirror off of, was really fascinating. I loved all of the artistry there. I just loved it. And I loved how softly spoken Isaac is to people, and how he can just, on the flip of a coin, he will completely go for it, and all his minions will go, and they listen and obey to his every beck and call. And Isaac is terrifying. Like, Absolutely. He is so powerful by the end of the season that, I mean, he's, we don't know where Carmilla is and the sisters are going to go quite, but like Isaac for me is in the best position by the end of this season, and
we know where he's going. Yeah,
we know where he's going. Definitely, he's going after Hector. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely worded it better in my review. I'm struggling for words right now, but like I was just fascinated by him, and watching him go from season 2 to season 3 is really delightful to see him grow as a character on his own.
Yeah, I mean, if you had told me that one of the two, he or Hector, would lead a storyline going into season 3, I would have definitely guessed Hector, because I feel like he was definitely better drawn there. But I think Isaac, in a lot of ways, because I think that he is deeply sympathetic to us as viewers. Like, I find him very sympathetic despite what he does. Like, every time he makes a decision, I understand why he makes it. And he has he seems to really enjoy conversing with people who he enjoys. And he has met, 3 people? Because there's also that woman in the town who tells him about the mirror toward the end of the season. And I feel like he's the character who has the most room for growth or de-escalation. I mean, I think that he is, to me, he's the wild card because he's building this army and building this army and building this army. But I think that he has, you guys might disagree with me, but I think he has the possibility of redemption here. Even if you think he needs to be redeemed, I guess, which is a question that is open, I suppose. But because he seems to be willing to adjust and move and talk to people and understand people in ways that even he doesn't want to acknowledge to himself at this point.
He's still loyal to Dracula as well, even though he's dead. So he's probably going to revive Dracula.
Yeah, I think that's a likely outcome. But I don't know. Like, I liked parts of Isaac's story, but also thought that him just going to Austria for revenge felt like the emptiest, least interesting goal here. My favorite storyline was Trevor and Sifa. Like, I just love love them as characters. I like their repartee. They probably had the most comedy in any of the 4 story arcs. So, like, them sort of encountering horrors, but mostly trying to do good, is my favorite storyline here. And also, they're just so cool in action. Like, the Trevor and the Sifa fights are just awesome. And I sort of hope that, this is maybe a different question than what Zach asked, but if there's a place in Castlevania lore that they haven't gone yet, but yet go, I hope it's Alucard becoming so jaded that he falls asleep only to be woken up by Richter and Maria. Drag Symphony of the Night into this, please.
Yes, if I was to get a sequel series with a different Belmont or a different Castlevania character, I would take either Symphony of the Night or Rondo of Blood, or I would take Aria of Sorrow, without a doubt, no question.
If we're into season 8, 9, 10, and they start having to go to other parts of Castlevania canon, I would welcome it, especially if they take this approach of taking characters and concepts and then telling their own story instead of just recreating. I think that's the best idea that this whole series presents.
I mean, I think that they present that opportunity. I mean, they have a doorway now to multiple worlds. I mean, like the whole Castlevania canon is open to them now. If it's true that corridor takes them wherever they want to go and it gets reopened by Saint Germain, then I'm not sure if I would really appreciate that. Like, oh, here's Simon now. I'm not really sure that would work for me, but I do think that presents the possibility of other elements of the canon coming in logically without it totally just obliterating whatever canon exists in the game, which I guess he doesn't really care about to begin with, but you know what I mean?
I would add, I really like just the speculation you put out there, Michael. If they brought a really good resolution at the end of season 4 and then wanted to keep it going by just being like, boom, like a generation or 2 later, here's Alucard and Richter and Maria, and now we're doing season 5 and it's a whole new scenario. Like, yeah, I'll miss having Belnades and Belmont, but I would totally be in for it. I'd be in for that adventure, man.
I bet Richter's got some sass in him, absolutely. Mm-hmm. You've seen him in Smash?
Oh, wow.
And Maria is adorable as well.
Maria is a great character. Man, I think it's interesting. Do all 4 of us have a different favorite arc then?
No. I think you and I are the same.
I don't think anyone has Alucard and the twins as their favorite arc.
That's a good point. But I appreciate y'all's opinions and where you come from. Alana, I think there's a lot of good to find in Isaac's plot. I think there are times that it is slow, and I also think that his initial feeling of like, all right, I just need to go get revenge on this one guy who betrayed Dracula. And it's like, why don't you just stick to the mission and kill all humans? Like, why do you got to get to Hector first? Like the revenge drive is just kind of like, okay, but it's the messing with his mind as he meets different people that sort of throw doubt and not just doubt but other ideas into his head, and in doing so it puts it into our head. And then I'm also going to say, Michael, like, yeah, Belnades and Belmont are like, those fighting scenes are my favorite fighting scenes. The whips are the best, and the ice magic, oh my gosh. I could just like watch her using ice magic to kill people in interesting ways forever.
Yeah, even when she's using like ice magic to take down night creatures in like the first or second episode, I'm like, oh man, that's so cool. She's like running across different like sheets of ice to get to him. Oh, it was amazing.
And it gets, doesn't she put up an ice shield for the judge or Saint Germain at some point?
So cool.
Yeah. And they get really creative with her use of ice and fire, and she even casts an electricity spell once to electrocute that bone minotaur thing that she was fighting.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot about that.
And one thing I think that just hangs over all four plots is the absence of Dracula, because Dracula being gone at the end of season 2 just that leaves Isaac sort of without a goal and without an inspiration. It leaves a power void among vampire society, which is what's driving the sisterhood. It deprives Belnades and Belmont of a goal that was their entire goal for seasons 1 and 2, and it affects Alucard in ways that are very personal, because this is his dad, and now he's trapped in his childhood home to a degree, but also gives him the idea of preserving and passing on Dracula's knowledge, which doesn't exactly go the way he intended. So Dracula hangs over all of it, even if he doesn't have a single line of dialogue in season 3. And I just really feel like this is everything is hurtling towards Dracula's resurrection.
I'm glad they didn't resurrect him this season, though.
Yes, I think so.
Very glad. I think it worked really, really well without him. Like, it showed everybody that there was there have been games largely without Dracula, but it showed everybody, like, how's this going to carry on without Dracula? Are we going to have a main villain? No, we're not. We're just going to throw everything in the melting pot, push people on a chessboard to different directions, and then see what happens. And this is what we got.
Yeah, Death is the final boss of one Castlevania game I mentioned earlier in this episode. So there are Castlevania games that avoid Dracula hanging over everything, but even when Dracula's not in the Netflix Castlevania show, I think he's still an important presence in everything.
Yeah. I mean, and I think they introduced that notion smartly in this season too. I mean, even by just like showing him, like, this is still an entity that exists on another plane, like, so that people aren't going to be like, oh, you resurrected the bad guy. I mean, like, it won't feel as anime, and I mean that in the best possible way, by at least acknowledging the possibility.
Yeah, I think it was the right thing to do, to show him, remind us he's there. And I know I probably had a different take than you guys on that. I thought he was sad, but also content to be left alone. But it's also possible that gesture meant, I'm ready to kick some ass and take revenge at the drop of a hat. Who knows? Yeah,
I mean, I think regardless, if he's pulled in against his will or because of his will, I think either one would probably piss him off in a different way. So I think that it would probably still work in future seasons.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. I really hope, I imagine at some point, someone's shown Warren Ellis the old dub of Symphony of the Night. And so, it's about miserable piles of secrets and all that. And as long as he just never even dares to reference that, I'm going to be okay. Because I feel like that would really ruin the tone of the show.
It would certainly, I think, go against what it is he seems to be doing at this point, which is, making his own story and not making it a collection. I mean, I don't know. I would be amused. Honestly.
If he put in just what is a man, but then didn't give the answer, I'd be okay with that.
No, I don't. I don't know. I mean, if anything, they've moved away from that phrase in recently, like in the PSP and PS4 version. Symphony of the Night, it's not in there at all.
Yeah, they completely redid the old stuff, which is for the best. Even though it's still a great meme material, it doesn't. I don't know that it would belong in this show.
Yeah, I don't think Warren Ellis is going to seek out Castlevania meme material.
Good man.
Well, if we're talking about that line, and I'm going to steal Mike's line here, it's probably about time for us to wrap up. Does anybody have any other final thoughts before we move on to housekeeping?
I'm really glad that I agreed with a lot of you, because I always get nervous that I have stupid opinions.
I liked your opinions, Pat.
Thanks, guys.
All right, well, thanks so much for talking to me, guys. I had a great time talking about this series, especially with three people who know way more about Castlevania than I do. Even as a person who has limited experience with it, I thought that it was, especially this season, was incredibly compellingly written. In terms of what's coming up, so next month we're going to have 2 episodes on Mother 3, which I'm super excited to play through all the way for the first time. And I think 2 of you are also going to be on that show, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't even started the game yet, but we have plenty of time.
Yeah. And also, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at retro@rpgfan.com. You can also comment on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Discord. We have a Twitch stream every day. We also have 3 other excellent podcasts. We've got Random Encounter, which deals with random topics that are usually pretty current. We have Rhythm Encounter, which is significantly less current because we haven't had an episode of that in a few years, but it's about music and it's still really great to go back and listen to old episodes of. And we also have our partner podcast, Phoenix Edge, which is hosted on YouTube and deals mostly with current events. You can also review us on iTunes, Google Play, whatever podcast listening venue that you prefer. We'd love feedback. And so let's talk about where we can reach each of us. So we'll start with you, Mike. How can listeners reach you?
Right. The easiest way to find me is probably Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times. I am also Monsoon Mike on the RPG Fan Discord server.
And Alana?
The best place to reach me is on Twitter. I am at Alana Hagues. Please come find me and follow me on there.
And Pat?
Yeah, Twitter's probably the best for me as well. I'm at Gameadactyl. It's like pterodactyl, but the word game in front of it, or in place of the tarot. And I am usually very quick to reply on Twitter. You can also, if you're really into game music, vgmdb.net, which is where you can find information on every soundtrack ever published.
And you've written about all of them, right?
I've written about over 1,000, actually. I just broke 1,000 recently.
That's awesome, Pat. Seriously.
Oh, thanks. I'm Ramza on there. If you ever want to, ask questions about rarity or collectability of a physical soundtrack, or you just want to chat it up about whatever, it's pretty common that people that read RPG Fan reach me that way as well. So register an account at VGMDB and hit me up on the forums there if you want.
Awesome. And if you'd like to reach me personally, you can email me at zachw@rpgfan.com, and you can also reach me on Discord at ZachW. And one final plug I want to give. First of all, we've referenced Alana's Season 3 review of Castlevania, which is amazing. If you haven't read it, you should go check it out. But we also have a lot of other features. Pat wrote about the first 2 seasons for an anime adaptations feature that we ran earlier. And we've been running a lot of reviews for anime or other adaptations of RPGs. So if you're interested in that sort of thing and you like this podcast, you should go check them out. So anyway, thanks again, guys. And thank you for listening, everybody. Good night and good luck. Hello, and welcome to episode 234 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly I'm going to start that again.
Top car.
Top.
Ooh, is it a podcast hosted by Top Cat?
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? Different cartoon cats.
All right.